welcome back to Rue's Life. So it's a gloomy old rainy old day here today, and this is a little video within a video, so you may have watched my previous one where I'm pottering about getting a few bits and pieces done. I've already done some harvesting, so I've got some curly kale, a few carrots, some mizuna and some chard and spinach, which we will have for tonight's tea. But what would really complete that meal would be a few potatoes. So these are the potatoes that I sowed at the beginning of the year, and I'll drop a link to that video above, and that'll have the date as well as to when they were actually sown, because I'm afraid off the top of my head I can't remember. So I'm going to harvest some of my first earlies. Now I'll be honest with you, they don't look as good as some of my previous potatoes grown this way. And again, I know I keep harking on about the peculiar season that we've had, but it was a funny old start to the season, and it may very well have affected these potatoes. But you know, they've grown, we've had lots of foliage, they haven't flowered, but that doesn't trouble me. So for me, I'll either harvest after they've flowered or when they start to die back like this. So I put in some first earlies, some second earlies, and some main crop. The first earlies were Colleen, the second earlies are Sarpo Una, and the main crop are King Edward. So today I'm going to just do one of the bags of the first early Colleen and see what we've got. If I don't think there's enough in there for a meal, then I will do a second bag. But the advantage, as I said when I actually planted these, is you can just harvest one bag and that's going to be enough for the two of us, usually for 1 or 2 meals. I'm suspecting maybe 1 meal at the moment. And what I didn't show you was once I'd initially planted 2 or 3 of the potatoes into each bag, I did then start to earth them up and roll up the bags as they grew. Now in an ideal world I would have continued to do that right the way to the top, but I ran out of compost, and I'll be honest with you, as some of you know, my health hasn't been its best this year and I was really lacking in energy. So one of the advantages to growing them in these bags is that, you know, we've got them, they're free, they're not going to cost us anything if we've already got the compost bags lying around, and you can do a small amount in each one and, as I say, just harvest a bag. One of the disadvantages for me over growing them the way I normally do, and I normally have them in one of the bigger beds in here, is that even if you don't earth them up, and I'll be honest with you, I don't always earth my potatoes up here in the polytunnel, because they're big deep beds, I still get a really good harvest. So I think it will have limited the amount of potato I get in these harvests. But enough of the waffle, the proof is always in the pudding, isn't it? And I love a good potato reveal. So I'm going to use the bag that's right behind me that you can't see, because that's the one where the foliage has died back the most. And as I say, there will have been 2 or 3 seed potatoes went into the bag, which again, as I say, the video will have been linked earlier. And let's see what we've got as a harvest. I'm not expecting great things because I could have earthed them up more, and as I say, everything I've grown this year has been a bit peculiar or a bit delayed. But let's see what we've got. So it really couldn't be simpler when you come to harvest out of these bags, and that's another of the advantages. And if you're somebody who has back problems or any mobility problems, you could have even had these up on some staging and you could sit down to do this. I've got my knee pads on and I like to get down on the floor, but because it's relatively light, you know, it's quite manageable. So when I originally planted them, I did put the lollipop type markers in, but as I started to earth them up, I realised I was soon going to lose those and it was a bit of a faff, so I actually just popped a label onto each bag. So these are the Colleen first early, so we can do away with the label, and I'm just going to pull out the last bit of foliage that's there, get rid of that, and then I'm literally going to just tip the contents of this bag into this big trug and then have a rummage through and see what we've got. So there we have it. It's not the biggest harvest in the world, but it's a harvest, and it's certainly enough for us to add to the vegetables I've got and make a meal. So don't let this put you off that I've had such a small yield, because as I say, had I actually earthed them up more all the way to the top of the bag, that way you get a much greater yield. So if you have a look at some of these, you know, they're really quite dinky. So they're only going to grow to the capacity of the size that you've given them. So because essentially I'd only really given them half of that bag space, had I filled it right to the top, allowed the foliage to keep going up, that would have put out more tubers. The tubers that were there would have had better chance of developing, and of course I would have had more of them. So it's entirely down to human error that I simply didn't earth them up and keep rolling them up. And when, as I say, when you grow in these bags, you really do have to keep putting on more earth or compost and rolling them up for you to get a really decent harvest. But I'm pretty pleased with that, and as I say, if it's something you're considering doing, please don't be put off. If you do things correctly, do as I say, not as I do, as the old adage goes, then you really would get a decent harvest. And it's certainly something that I will be doing again, and as I say, in previous years, prior to being on the farm actually, when we had a garden and a small plot within the garden, I did grow potatoes successfully this way. So I hope you've enjoyed this little potato reveal, albeit small. I hope you're all well. I hope you're getting some better weather than we are here. On a positive note, it may be cool and wet outside, but it's always warm and dry here in the polytunnel. So thank you so much for watching. If you are new to my channel, please do consider subscribing and hit that bell to get notifications of all my latest videos, where I try to show you, very honestly, elements of my life, including the growing and gardening, and I'm going to show you my successes as well as my failures, or things that don't go quite so much to plan as I would like them to. But that's gardening for you, and there's always lessons to be learnt, and as I say, I was fully aware that I hadn't really looked after these as well as I should, so I didn't expect great things. But for now, take care, and I'll see you all again soon.